The AI often will kind of give us a generic, like results for a generic situation. We talk about it might not take into account the experience of the physician, their role, the location, and we just typically we don't deal with a lot of generic situations.
Brent, thank you for joining me today. I think you are the perfect person to talk about the intersection of AI and healthcare valuation. So I appreciate you joining us and giving us the benefit of your expertise.
Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, let's start off by, first of all, let me kind of set the stage for the listeners about kind of where this topic came from. I've got a healthcare client, a physician client. He is brilliant. He's a brilliant practitioner, and he's putting together a larger new healthcare venture. And as part of that venture, he is using some other healthcare space on the weekends, where he is partnering with another healthcare organization. And for compliance purposes, he's paying what is to be fair market value for the lease payments for this rental space. And so I encouraged him to get a valuation, a fair market valuation, to confirm that what he was paying was actually fair market value. And what he came back with was an AI generated report. Now, I am a big fan of AI. I use AI in many things, but when it comes to healthcare valuations, I'm dubious about using AI retroactively to support a conclusion that you've already made. So let me start by asking, are you seeing some of your clients come to the table with like expectations about what AI, maybe unrealistic expectations about what AI can do for them and maybe replace healthcare valuations?
Yeah, we're starting to see a little bit of that where they're doing a search and they're trying to say, okay, what kind of multiple can I get, or perhaps what kind of price can I get? A lot of times we're required by the attorney to render an opinion. It's something they necessarily don't really want to do. They're told that they want to do it. If there's a shortcut, that's probably where they might look first. And so it's like, what does AI say about this? And so there's a lot of stuff on there. I've only seen a couple thus far, but sometimes it sets what I would categorize as unrealistic expectations and unsubstantiated, values. They may reference a couple things, but from what I've seen, when you actually dig into the support, it starts to fall apart in terms of something that would be defensible if you were questioned by a counterparty, or perhaps a legal authority, or an attorney,
the government,
or
the Department of Justice, those
Right.
types of attorneys. I suspect that more and more people are turning to AI. In fact, there may be instances of you not even getting the call because a potential client thinks they have checked that box by having ChatGPT generate a retroactive report. And so it never even gets to your desk.
Yeah, I haven't seen that yet. I will say that one thing that I've been to several conferences, whether it's in the healthcare space or just kind of general. Obviously, AI is a really big topic right now, and one of the things is, what are the pitfalls of it? And it seems like there's a lot of confirmation bias, as you were talking about, where if you do a retroactive analysis, it almost like the AI agent, some of them more than others, but they kind of want to be your friend. Almost, they want to confirm what you're putting into it. It's like, okay, it looks like you're leading me to a outcome that you want, that you'll be happy with. Whereas we need to basically say, hey, look, it might be there or it might not. So haven't seen it a lot yet, but certainly I would expect to see more of it in the future.
So maybe we should start by talking about what a healthcare valuation actually is and what we're trying to accomplish. I've seen them typically in like valuing acquisitions, like asset acquisitions, but they can be used in a lot of different contexts. What is a healthcare valuation?
Well, there are many reasons that we're engaged for healthcare evaluations. Now, we're typically engaged by the attorney, but we sometimes do it directly. Now, the benefit of doing it with an attorney is you maintain attorney-client privilege, and so there's some things that go back and forth, like with drafts and confidential information that you don't want out there. It's not discoverable. It's protected. So that's what we do. But there's several reasons that we are hired, most notably to mitigate the regulatory and compliance risks for the OIG with Stark and any kickback, because ultimately they're protecting the government, the taxpayers, because they're paying for those services. The parties want an independent review and a sign off on an arrangement between two parties that may be related or that jointly benefit economically. They're important to align compensation with the contribution of a physician or transactions between healthcare entities. Like we were talking about earlier, in the lead up, a physician is selling his practice. He spent decades to build, or perhaps he or she is wanting to bring on a new partner to continue the practice to allow him or her to scale back the hours. So there's a variety of things that we're brought in to do, which is actually there's a lot more aspects of it in healthcare than I see in other industries.
So what tell me kind of how you would start the process, or what's the process for doing a healthcare valuation? Let's say we're doing a valuation on an asset sale. And so we want to value the different assets. What are the kinds of steps that you go through in order to issue a compliant or a credible report?
So, it always starts with an introductory call with a prospective client or attorney, understand the situation or need. It can be assets, practice. Sometimes we're doing tangibles. Often in the healthcare space, we're doing patents. We've done pre-revenue pharma evaluations, but we'll follow that up with a supplemental data request for relevant documents. And often we'll use a non-disclosure agreement to preserve confidentiality. And so we usually process that within probably a day or two. Once we get the data, probably give it a couple days to review the data, then we'll scope the engagement and draft the proposal. And like I said earlier, we often facilitate that through the attorney, but we can go either way. And once we get the signature on that proposal, then we'll submit a kind of a supplemental data request and begin our work. So from a timeline perspective, it does vary, but generally speaking, we tell our clients we'd like to have 3 to 4 weeks to analyze the data and to prepare a draft report. But as often the case, there's urgency. And so we're pretty flexible, especially in our shop. We do a lot of quick turn engagements to meet the client's needs. So we'll issue a draft report for feedback. And then the parties will get together, we'll review and revise if necessary for a couple of days. Sometimes it's a week, depends on people's schedules. And when all the parties are comfortable with it, then we issue a signed and certified final report.
Yeah, so you mentioned data, and I suppose there's data from the client, information about the deal or the assets that you're valuing. Do you look to other data like market available data or information so to do like a comparative analysis? Describe that process.
Yeah, so we subscribe to multiple databases. Like more general, we do like Capital IQ. We get some stuff from, say, Deal Stats. Some are specific, like MGMA data for compensation. And like I said, when I go into our general databases, we can narrow that down by the industry code, whether it's the SIC or NAICS code. To narrow those results, we can also do it by geography, size, and then sometimes specialty. There are other things that we look at, like, for example, compensation surveys, some of which cost money, that didn't used to actually before COVID. And so, we really sample a broad spectrum of data, at least in the initial phase.
So how important is it that whatever data you're looking at is accurate? What are you using that data? What do you use that data for, and why is it important that data be accurate?
Well, obviously you have to rely upon it. So, especially in a healthcare setting, and we also do some litigation support. And so it's really important to substantiate, the data versus, say, if you're saying you're a business valuation for internal management purposes, where somebody, it may never get to a counterparty or a regulatory authority or something. You've got to substantiate that value. So you have to be able to point, cite, um, in the report, in the analysis. And so, again, we try to get a wide spectrum of data, but ultimately we're going to narrow that down. And the conclusion has to be substantiated by reliable data or reliable source. So that's really what we're trying to do is get to the most defensible opinion that we can render.
So if you're asked, for example, to do a valuation on a physician's compensation, is the physician's compensation a fair market value for the services the physician is providing? You might go to MGMA and pull data, like compensation data for this particular region, for this particular discipline. Maybe he or she's a cardiologist. Maybe they've for the length of time they've been practicing. So you've got market specific data, you've got region specific, discipline specific, experience specific, and you've got a range of what reasonable compensation typically looks like for those individuals, right?
Right.
All right, and so I guess then AI usually doesn't have access to this degree of quality of data that you have access to through these paid services, I would assume.
Yeah, that's been my experience. I mean, obviously there's firewalls. There's people that have collected the data, they paid for it, they want to protect it. Now, if there's a way in, maybe they'll try to get in the back door, or maybe they'll have some kind of a relationship to get that data. But I would assume right now that it's behind those subscriptions.
It's behind, and not only that, I mean, even if it can pull together parts of that from different sources, there's no way to tell through AI if it is how accurate or how recent it is, how relevant
Right.
it is to this specific question.
Yeah. So some of the searches I've seen, just real quick, I mean, it summarizes in general circumstances. And to your point about timing, the one thing is like, okay, this is a summary of what we've seen. But then if you say, okay, well, show me the sources. Like you said, it may be 7 or 8 years old. Now, might still be able to rely upon that if the more recent data that you can find, is commensurate with that. But there might be a shift for whatever reason. And also, it may give you bands. It may hallucinate also, quite frankly, but it may give you bands, but it's important. That's where the specialty comes in to identify who exactly we're looking at, what type of experience, and why is it that they might actually deserve compensation between the 75th and 90th percentile versus everybody gets the median.
Yeah. In my experience, I've used AI to generate different reports, and as a general rule, it doesn't cite all of the references that you need it to cite.
Right.
It won't give you information about the quality of the data that it's relying on to issue or generate the report. What as the appraiser or as someone who's valuing the compensation, what position does that put you in? How do you defend a report when you can't verify the accuracy of the data itself?
Well, it's difficult. I like it too. Like when we have some new hires and we'll say, okay, why don't you go put this together? And they'll give me a report. And I'm like, yeah, but you didn't cite this stuff. So I don't know if it's accurate. The same thing applies here. It's like, okay, ultimately, we've got to be able to cite it. Footnotes are really important, not only in our supporting schedules, but in the report. We need to be able to footnote things. Where does it come from? Because especially in a regulatory matter, sometimes people are just prone, the opposition prone to ask questions, prone to come up with counterpoints. We see a lot of this when we do some financial reporting work. The auditor's job is to find holes in your analysis, or when we're doing a litigation assignment, the opposite party, their goal is to find holes in it. They want you, they're not going to take it at face value. They want you to substantiate it. So that's why it's really important to understand, where the data is coming from and how accurate that is.
In the example I gave with the physician compensation, I mentioned the region the physician's in, their discipline, their experience. From let's turn to like lease payments or rental payments. It could be the office space, what class of office space, where is it located in the city, what other amenities are available at that location. Are there other healthcare providers in the area? Are you on a hospital campus, for example, or in professional office buildings? There's a lot of factors that go into whether or not the data is relevant to the specific question you're being asked to answer. And
Right.
so, can AI can it serve a useful function in helping to prepare valuations, or is it just not something you can rely on at all?
I think, it will definitely help us. I think what we're seeing right now is it helps us speed up the front end of the process, right? We're getting to that middle to late stage quicker with AI. It can pull the data, it can summarize it faster. For example, a lot of times we get a lot of documents, especially in PDF format.
Mm-hmm.
And, yeah, we can cycle through it, but sometimes there are things that, because I've gotten PDF like budgets, well, I need those in Excel. And they say, we don't have those in Excel. And so it can do a pretty good job of picking the data from the PDF and converting into Excel. There's other programs that do it, but so far from what I've seen, there's some things in AI that do it better, faster, and more accurate. That aspect of it enhances what we can do as professionals.
So manipulating the data that you provide it rather than asking it to provide you with the data.
Right. If I can spend, for example, if I or my staff don't have to spend an extra 4 or 5 hours of data entry, we can move along the process, which ultimately is two things. One gets us to the conclusion faster, but also can help us at some point be more cost effective, for our clients.
So where does your judgment come in? Let's say you have good data or you have quality data from one of these services. Where does your professional judgment come into play?
Well, I mean, like I said, that mid to end part of the valuation, it's why the experienced healthcare professionals make the decisions that, ultimately lead to the conclusion, and not the junior analyst that was gathering data pre-AI. And again, many compensation details are confidential and unavailable to the general public or databases, or they're behind firewalls. I mean, some reports cost $2,000 or more, and sometimes we have the budget, sometimes we don't. But working in through deals with other clients, and while you're never going to compromise that data, you have a sense of what the terms and the acceptable ranges are of what's been done elsewhere, and were those challenged, were those accepted by the attorney. It basically, you have an internal database to rely upon when you're evaluating, possibly structuring a deal or opining on it. So I think it's, there's no substitute for that.
So one of the reasons, the main reason to have a valuation is that in the future, if the Department of Justice comes knocking on your door, asking you how you arrived at this compensation figure or this price for the asset purchase, at that point, it's up to you, I suppose, to defend your opinion. Have you ever been in that position before where you've had to justify the conclusions that you reached in your valuation?
Not to the government. I mean, there have been opposing attorneys that have, asked, okay, let's walk through this, and they've pressed us on some issues, but obviously, they're motivated to ask questions. Typically we just we go through that and provide all the support that is necessary.
I've got one last question, but before I do, is there anything I need to touch on that I haven't yet?
Um, I mean, I think we've talked about it a little bit, but the AI often will kind of give us a generic, like results for a generic situation.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about it might not take into account the experience of the physician, their role, the location, and we just typically we don't deal with a lot of generic situations. And so, that's something that's where the professional experience uh, comes into play. And, you know, basically when we have to defend it, like say if the government or another party would attack it, where do they go first? Often it's commercial reasonableness, whether the arrangement actually makes economic sense, whether it be without referrals. We're how many physicians were being paid for, medical directorships, um, or managerial services. Do they overlap? Is it costing the entity far more than they would pay a third party? And often they ask, like, did they actually perform the work? Is it realistic? I mean, if you have a doctor that's also in practice, but also providing all these services, and it's like, okay, wait a minute, in order for this compensation plan to work, they almost must be working full time to provide management services or medical directorship. And so are the document hours, you know, are they documenting those hours? Often they're so busy. I mean, I can relate to this as well. I'm going back and forth on things. We're obviously, we enter our time every day or every couple of days, and sometimes I'm like, okay, I got to figure out exactly how much time I spent on all of these things that I did because I've been jumping back and forth through things. So I understand that's a difficult thing to sometimes track the hours, but sometimes when they come back, is this realistic? Is it a lot of times what we do for commercial reasonableness, we don't always get this data. But I asked them in an arrangement, I said, okay, if you would, please give me your historical, but a lot of times we're dealing with clients in an arrangement that they're just putting it together. So there's no historical data, but they have pro formas budgets, what they think is going to happen. And what I say is, okay, if I can, give me both sides, so I can evaluate the economics of both parties. And so we'll say, okay, if it plays out the way you've budgeted, you're going to earn a profit of X%. And so then we bring in some benchmarking from an industry perspective and also leaning on our experience. Okay, how does that compare to the industry median or 75th percentile or what? Is it higher? If both parties are higher, then okay, that's probably better unless it comes at the expense of the government. But if one party is lopsided, if one party is making 60 or 70%, and the other is making 5%, whereas the industry is 15, well, then you've got a problem with commercial reasonableness, right? So, and I think we touched on the other stuff. What does AI work do well in our workflow? Again, it moves us along the front end of the valuation faster. We can review documents, summarize them. We do have to check them. I will say, we've done some stuff in the financial reporting space for warrant valuations with a lot of confusing terms and things like that. We kind of caught it a couple of times, misinterpreting some things. But it can definitely help us convert a lot of the data that we get to a manageable form that makes it faster for us to analyze.
I tell my clients, I also teach some classes on healthcare valuations and healthcare transactions. I tell my students that one of the benefits of having a valuation by a respected company like Marshall and Stevens is that number one, you have all the information in one place. You know where that report is. You don't have scraps in different files. You've got a report. It's a report that's sourced well with accurate data. It's written well, and there's a live person behind it who can defend and explain what the report means if there's questions, or they can defend their judgment. And it provides a level of credibility to the process that you don't have when you just spitball it with the buyer or the seller, or you just kind of guess, take a stab at what the valuation is. So
Right.
I think valuations are incredibly important because not just because there's accurate data, but because of the experienced professional putting that report together.
Right. And again, we are going to have work papers behind what we do, that we document our process along the way. And so, what happens if something comes up? Because a lot of times in healthcare, you issue an opinion and it may not get reviewed until, maybe it gets reviewed immediately, but oftentimes you get a call and you say, hey, you know what? This got pulled for review. We need to relook at this, or perhaps on renewal. And we have to go back and look at those work papers. And I guess you could save an AI transcript or whatever, but it's not the same as the work papers. And, we keep those for 7 to 10 years. We've got, binders back in our office about all the things. So if we had to pull it and reference it to provide support for the opinion that we issued 2, 3, 5 years ago, we can do that.
Yeah. Well, Brent, I appreciate the discussion today. If people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way they can do that?
Well, they can check out our website, marshall-stevens.com. I'm also on LinkedIn. My email is bshockley@marshall-stevens.com. That's SHOCKLEY. Sometimes I'll post on there various things. I like sports business, but certainly healthcare valuation is one of my specialties. So we've probably got 3 to 5 active projects in that space at a given time. And again, they vary. It can be compensation arrangements. We do pre-farm evaluations, transactions, physician practice valuations. Basically, anything that a client needs a value of, we can be of service.
Outstanding. Well, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
The information presented in this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only and does not constitute legal advice. No attorney-client relationship is created between the hosts, guests, or any listener. The discussion of any legal topic should not be relied upon as a substitute for consultation with a qualified attorney regarding your specific situation. If you need legal advice, please consult an attorney licensed in your jurisdiction.